Hi everyone. I've been seeing a few videos on YouTube of people documenting their running journeys or their training journeys, their marathon progress, that sort of thing, and they really interest me, and I thought I'd do my own video documenting my involvement in the running and triathlon world over the past 20 years or so. Back in my 20s, I'd never did any sport at all. I guess I dabbled with bikes. I used to BMX and mountain bike as a teenager, but in my 20s I didn't do any sport at all. I was busy working, playing video games, smoking, that sort of thing. My dad was a marathon runner at the time. He had Huntington's disease, but he was determined to stay as fit and as healthy for as long as he could. And so right into his 60s, in his early 60s, he was running marathons, London Marathon, that sort of thing. And we'd go and watch him as a family. We'd go down to London and watch him do the London Marathon, not really knowing what it meant. Like I say, I wasn't a runner myself, so he was just running a marathon. I had no understanding really of what was involved in that at all. And so I got to my late 20s, I suppose, just turned 30 around about the year 2000. My wife and I were expecting our first child. I was still smoking. I was really badly asthmatic as a smoker, strangely. I'd have a cigarette and then I'd have to have a couple of puffs on my inhaler afterwards to clear the asthma. Asthma was really quite scary, and I'd often wake up in the morning gasping for breath, or if I had a laughing fit or something, the asthma would kick in. And if you don't know it, you may not understand, but it's like a vice clenching your chest, or trying to breathe through a straw. It's incredibly scary, and a couple of puffs on the inhaler and I'd be all right to have another cigarette again. And I didn't really want that to carry on. I was 30, my wife was pregnant. I knew I would never be able to play football in the park with my kids, or go for a bike ride with them. I wasn't up to it. If I ever got a cold, I'd have a chest infection and I'd be coughing up blood. It was awful. I knew something had to change, and so I decided to start running, like my dad was. And I can remember the first night I went out to go for a run, in the dark, like a lot of new runners, I think, so that no one sees you. And I can remember setting off running, getting about a minute down the road and absolutely gasping for breath, back on the inhaler, and then limping home afterwards, staggered at how desperately unfit I was, I guess. I was 30 years old. I've never been overweight, so I was slim, and it didn't make sense for me to be so unfit that I couldn't even run for a minute. But I tried again, a couple of days later, and I tried again, and I tried again, and over the next sort of 6 months, year or so, I think I managed to run my first mile, and then my first 2 miles, and got towards being able to run for 10 minutes without stopping, 15 minutes without stopping. And before I knew it, I was doing half an hour or 40 minutes. I didn't understand about paces. I didn't have a Garmin watch. I didn't have anything like that. What I used to do was, I had a piece of string with mile increments marked along it, and I would measure my route on a map, tracing this piece of string around where I'd run to see how far I'd run. And over the next sort of 18 months or so, up until the year 2002, I was a fairly regular runner, running up to an hour or so at a time. And my dad said to me in 2002, why don't we run a local half marathon together. So I sort of did what he did, which was to run a bit longer now and then. I didn't really understand it was a long run or it was training runs in the week or anything. I just tried to run a bit longer at the weekends. And eventually we got round to this half marathon. We ran together. We ran at the back of the field. My dad's Huntington's disease was quite progressed by then, so we were at the back of the field. My dad had a slight obvious sort of loss of control because of the Huntington's, and so I remember being at the back of the field, and there was a St John's ambulance car right behind us, and occasionally they'd pull alongside and they'd say, "You all right?" And we'd say, "Yeah, we're fine, we're absolutely fine." And we got around in 2 hours and 11 minutes. I was absolutely destroyed. I couldn't have got any quicker if I'd wanted to, you know. And so my dad said to me, you go ahead, Tom. You see if you can get under 2 hours. There's no chance. Absolutely no chance. I was hanging on towards the end. Anyway, we got round, and it was an amazing day, you know, to run a half marathon with my dad, who was struggling by then, but we did it together, and it was some memories that I'll never ever forget. And I carried on running for the next few years. I didn't do any races. I kept just doing some more training, and I entered the London Marathon every year, and I didn't get in. So 2002, 2003, 2004, 5, 6, entered the London Marathon, didn't get in. But back in those days, if you entered and got rejected 5 times on the trot, you got automatic entry for the next year. So 2007, I got my place in the London Marathon, my first ever marathon. I still had no understanding of training for a marathon. I just did a long run at the weekends. But to be honest, I kind of kidded myself a little bit with a long run then. Again, pace had no meaning. Nutrition, fueling, all that sort of stuff, not a clue. Not a clue at all. I would take my Sony Walkman in a bum bag with me. And I'd do some long runs. And if I did 10 miles, you know, that's kind of like a half marathon, isn't it? And that's kind of like, if you do 14 miles, it's nearly 15 miles, which is basically 20 miles. So that's a long run, isn't it? You know, I didn't really understand about a proper training schedule for a marathon. So on the day 2007, it was a really hot year for London Marathon, as we get from time to time. Super hot year. I can remember going around first half feeling fantastic, got halfway, Tower Bridge, in just a shade over 2 hours, and thought, well, there we go, look, I'm halfway around a marathon in 2 hours. I'll probably finish in like 4 hours. And then it hit me. Then I hit the wall at about 14 miles, and it's one of those walls that goes on for the rest of the marathon. I'd never run 16 or 17 or 18 or 20 miles before, and oh boy, did I struggle. You know, I got halfway in 2 hours, and from there on I was dragging my feet, sobbing, whimpering, stopping against the barriers, stretching out my aching legs. My quads had completely seized up. I was stopping at the aid tent, sort of begging for help, and then stopping at the next aid tent, and then getting some Vaseline and getting another bottle of Lucozade. And I eventually finished in 5 hours and 45 minutes. So the second half of the marathon took me 3 hours 45, which my dad then told me was his marathon PB, much to his amusement. He was thrilled to bits that I'd done it, obviously, but he did say, just so you know, Tom, that's my marathon PB you've done in the second half, 3:45. And that kind of sparked a desire in me to improve. I think I hated every second of that half marathon, of the second half of the marathon. And for a few years I didn't do another marathon. I knew I had to do something to improve, and Dexter! I knew I had to find some way to improve. I knew it wasn't good enough. I knew I had more than 5:45 in me. I remember getting overtaken by Indiana Jones at about 23 miles, and he was towing a 20-foot boulder. I swear he was towing this boulder. All the rhinos went past me. There were people going past me probably three times my age saying, "Come on son, you can do it." And I was just embarrassed. So when I got back, I joined the running club that had organised the half marathon that I'd done with my dad. So I joined the local running club and started training with them, and started understanding I guess a bit about the interval sessions that we did on Tuesday, where you ran really hard, and the sort of steady run you did on the Thursday, and then people started talking about the long runs, and it kind of started to make a little bit of sense about this training business. And then I was running around the track one day, and there was this guy in front of me in his spandex or his lycra or whatever it was that I didn't know what it was at the time, but he had his name across his bum and he had GBR written underneath his name. And I thought, wow, look at this. And he explained to me that he was a Team GB age group triathlete, and this was like mind-blowing to me. I'd never heard of triathlon. I loved cycling. I couldn't swim. I could do breaststroke. I could sort of not drown, but I couldn't do any more than that. But this sort of inspired me to look into triathlon. I bought myself a road bike. I learned how to swim, or I started swim training, should I say. And in about 2008, I did my first triathlon, just a local one, a local pool-based triathlon, and really loved it. I swam breaststroke. Everyone else was doing front crawl, so that was the next challenge, to learn how to do front crawl. But I absolutely loved it, and over the next few years I did triathlon, whether it was off-road triathlon with my mountain bike in Thetford Forest, or off-road duathlon, sorry, with my mountain bike, or small-ish local triathlons. I did those for a few years and obviously carried on the running training. I was doing half marathons, getting slowly quicker. I think I got my half marathon time down to about 1:40. Carried on entering the London Marathon, obviously. Not getting in, but I entered it a few times. And then I got a place in the running club ballot for 2011. So I was a lot fitter, cross-training in many ways, so swimming and cycling, running better. Probably running too fast all the time. I think there's a big misconception amongst a lot of runners that if you want to be a fast runner, you've got to run fast, all the time. And that just gave me calf injury after Achilles injury after stress fracture. But I did manage to manage to run London in 2011, and I did it in 4 hours 38, so I knocked over an hour off my first marathon time. I was absolutely thrilled to bits. And then later in that year I went and did Liverpool Marathon, and there I ran 4:08. Really more by luck than judgment. I had some understanding of training, but not a huge amount really. I didn't do recovery runs, or I didn't have any hydration or nutrition plans on my long runs. Just by avoiding injury from time to time at the right training block, I managed to get down to 4:08. And then the following year, 2012, I got another London Marathon place, and I did 3:38. So I was kind of staggered. It hadn't gone beautifully. I was a lot slower in the second half, but I was 2 hours quicker than my previous time, or my first London time, and I was inside my dad's PB which I was really pleased about. Not that it was a target, but it was always a, if I can be as quick as my dad, kind of motivator. He came down to watch, my family came down to watch, and I was absolutely thrilled to bits with 3:38. I was hoping for 3:30, and I trained towards 3:30, but just blew up in the second half. But around about that time I started to get a lot of hip niggles. My hip and my sort of top of my pelvis was really sore every time I ran, and it got worse and worse until I basically couldn't run with it, and went to see a physiotherapist who told me that my running was pretty much over, to be honest. They said, you've got an arthritic hip through overuse. And I remember now that they told me that my running future was like a bath full of water, and the more I emptied out, the more running I did, the quicker it would run out, and when it was gone, and that would be my running finished. And I was kind of staggered by this. You know, I'd done a couple of years of running, and I really was getting into it, really enjoying it, and the last thing I wanted to do was think about stopping. So I eased off the running, and I did more cycling. And then 2014 came round, and I got another place in the London Marathon. Training hadn't been going well, I hadn't been able to do masses of running, but by this time my dad was getting quite ill. He was confined to a wheelchair now. He came down, he was planning to come down to watch the marathon with my stepmother, and in my head I didn't think I was going to get much more than halfway around, and so that was my plan, was to run to halfway, see my dad, give him a cuddle, and then pull out of the race. But when I got there, I got across Tower Bridge, followed the route round, saw my dad, stopped and gave him a big cuddle, and felt amazing, felt inspired to carry on, to be honest. And so I didn't think I could. He was so pleased to see me and said I was doing so well. I thought, I can't stop now. So I carried on running, in tears I think, having seen my dad. But I carried on, and I finished eventually 4:38. So it was the time, I say the time wasn't good. I only planned to run halfway, so I can't really complain at all. You know, I finished it in 4:38. That was my 4th London. It's probably about my 7th or 8th marathon by then, I think. And from there on I carried on training, because the hip pain seemed to sort of disappear after that. I think a lot of the bike and swim training and strength training had helped, but the hips seemed a lot better. So I carried on. I was still doing triathlon. I'd moved up to half iron distance by now, so obviously doing lots of long bike rides, entering some local half iron distance races. And then I did one called, it was at Eton Dorney Lake, half iron, Day of Endurance, Eton Day of Endurance, that was it. And I finished 5th overall in the iron distance, in the half iron distance, sorry. Finished 5th overall, won my age group, and qualified for a place in the Team GB age group European Championship in 2015. I was absolutely thrilled to bits. I couldn't believe it. I absolutely couldn't believe it. So we started, you know, that race was probably 10 months away or so. So I carried on training straight through the winter, wanting to be as fit as I could be to go out to Italy, with the family coming out to watch, my dad coming out again to watch. And in the December of that year, I can remember riding to work on my road bike one day. It was a little bit cold, went under some trees where the sun hadn't got to, hit some black ice, and fell off and landed on my back in the middle of the road. The next thing I knew, I was in A&E having some x-rays done. I'd broken my back. devastated. I was thinking, 16 months until this biggest race I've ever done, and I'm laying here, with a broken back. But luckily they said I just needed to, it's a stable fracture, so I just needed to wear a back brace for 10 to 12 weeks, which I did. After about 4 weeks or so, I started training in my back brace. So I was down the swimming pool doing aqua jogging. I was doing some turbo sessions in the back brace, doing some walking hill repeats, that sort of thing. And I did manage to get to the start line. I couldn't not go to the start line, really. My family had all arranged to come out and watch me. And I got to the start line and I had a good sea swim and a decent bike. And I managed to get around the run on barely any training, to be honest. So I was never looking to be at the front of the field, but I did manage to finish, and we had an amazing week's holiday in Italy afterwards. And from there I kind of kicked on. Again, the run of form carried on. I went into 2016 and did Brighton Marathon, and finally got the sub 3:30 I was after, so I ran 3:28 at Brighton, and it was probably my best ever marathon, to be honest. It was paced evenly right the way through. I felt strong right the way through. I finished feeling strong, and when you're finishing a marathon feeling strong, I haven't done it very often, I'll be honest, I haven't done it very often, but everyone is walking, slowing down, shuffling, stretching out to the side of the red course. God knows I've been there enough times myself. But when you see everyone around you slowing down and you're feeling good, it's an amazing feeling. So I managed to kick on, hold it together, and finish in 3:28, which was amazing, really. I was really, really happy with that. And so as Brighton Marathon had gone so well, I finally decided it was time to take the plunge and sign up to my first Ironman. I always knew I was going to do one, but I wanted to wait until I'd run a solid, decent marathon first before I took the plunge and signed up to a full Ironman, because I didn't. Every other marathon bar Brighton, I'd struggled for the last 6 or 8 miles or 10 miles, and I knew that would only be so much worse at the end of an Ironman. So I waited until I felt the time was right, and then I signed up for Ironman Vichy in the south of France. Myself and a few friends signed up to Ironman Vichy and really started piling on the long bike training towards the end of 2016. 2017 I did London Marathon again. That was my fifth time doing London, and that was off a lot of bike miles. And then all through the summer, big bike miles, Dunwich Dynamo. If you know what that is, that's a sort of unofficial sportive way where a few thousand cyclists meet in the centre of London fields on a Saturday afternoon in June or July, and then through the night you cycle out to Dunwich on the Suffolk coast, and you arrive in time for breakfast in the cafes there. It's an amazing ride, and so I did that with some friends, part of my training towards Ironman Vichy. And on the day, we went down to the south of France. Again, we had a holiday booked around it, and race day, 34 degrees, non-wetsuit swim, which was not the best news you've ever had. So the swim was slow. Swim was 25 minutes or so slower. I think it did about an hour and 20, an hour and 25. Bike ride was amazing, and the run was just incredibly tough. It was so hot by then. An amazing support on these Ironman events. They set them up very well. The run tends to be in 3 or 4 loops with aid stations every mile and massive support. And it was just soaking up the atmosphere, getting to the next aid station, keep on going, and just tick the miles off. And I finished in 11:45. My target had been 12 hours, so I was really happy with my overall time. Amazing day. But I did think to myself, you know, if that had been a wetsuit swim, if it hadn't been quite so hot, I reckon I could get under 11 hours. Why is it that, you know, within 5 minutes of doing a race, you're planning your next one? So we carry on, we move into late 2017, and a local triathlete does a European long distance championships in Almere. So Joe Skipper, I'm sure you know of him, he does this race in Almere, wins the world championships, or wins the European championships, and a few of us think that looks like a nice race to go and do. So we sign up for 2019 Challenge Almere. It's a really fast course, and I think to myself, this is one where I can really try and get that sub 11 Ironman time. We call it an Ironman time. Obviously it's a long distance triathlon, but it's the same distances: 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, and a marathon. So I go really heavy on the bike miles and really heavy on the swim training. So right the way through that winter, our local swimming pool had closed for refurbishment, and living out in South Norfolk, there's not much choice of swimming pools. So the local pool is closed, and so we're river swimming, and we're sea swimming, and we're lake swimming, just to get the training in. And so right the way through that winter, 2018 to 2019, I was sea swimming, you know, in neoprene hat, boots, gloves, perishing cold, big swells out in the sea. We'd do an end-to-end 2-miler, tide assisted 2-miler, or we'd go out and back for 40 minutes. Really mentally challenging, you know. After 5 minutes or so, when your brain is yelling at you, it is so perishingly cold, and then you say to yourself, just keep trying, and then suddenly you realise it's warmer in the water than it is out of the water. So you think, oh, fair enough, I'll keep going. And you know, for the mental and physical training, I don't think anything can beat it. It's incredibly tough, but really rewarding as well. And so we're sea swimming right through the winter, biking right through on Zwift, which I'm sure you all know. So really good structured bike sessions right the way through the winter. And then into the start of 2019, probably about as fit as I've ever been, I guess. I did Bungay half marathon, which is a hilly, for Norfolk, hilly half marathon, which I finished in 1 hour 30 minutes and 12 seconds. 12 seconds. Super pleased with it. I was on pace to go under 90 minutes, which was my target, but just ran out of steam at the end. Then carrying on, May 2019, I did the Ipswich Twilight 5k race, which is one of the fastest 5k road races in the UK. An amazing race. I can't wait to go back and do it again when all this changes, but I did that in 19 minutes and 14 seconds, so that's another little target for later, is sub 19 in the 5k. So in really good shape heading into Almere. And so race day came about. Absolutely perfect weather conditions, no wind at all, sunny but not too hot. Couldn't have been better. Amazing weather conditions. I was a bit panicked by the swim, to be honest, because I've had a few panic attacks in some races, getting kicked in the ribs, or I'd been sick in a race and had to pull out in the build up to that. So I had a few dodgy swims, but on the day absolutely nailed the Challenge Almere swim. I had a dream target of an hour, and I think I missed out by a couple of minutes, but mainly to get around in one piece without having to pull out or be lifted out or being sick or anything was a major bonus. So I got out of the swim in 1:02 feeling incredible. Out on the bike course, just feeling effortless. You know, when you've trained with power meters and Zwift and you know exactly the power output you're going for, and just to hold that power feeling really good. Nutrition went well, drinking regularly, not forgetting to do anything, not making any stupid mistakes. Got through the first lap. It was a 2-lap course. Got through the first 56-mile lap thinking about the time you'd taken and what 1 lap had taken, and doubling that up and adding on 4 hours, you know, for the run, and thinking I can get under 11 hours here. I'm on target to get under 11 hours. And then get into the second lap of the bike and not losing any strength and not losing any speed, and getting halfway around the second lap thinking I still feel amazing. And then you start doing some recalculations thinking maybe 10:30 is possible, maybe 10:20 is possible. Anyway, keep going, get the bike done, get out on the run. And luckily we had lots of friends out there, loads of support, flat run course, and just ticking the laps off, feeling really amazing. Walking through the aid stations, just slow down, grab something to eat, grab a drink, and back running again. And kept on, and before you know it, finish line's coming around, and I finished in 10 hours 26. I was completely made up by that finishing time. Marathon time was 3:59. Absolutely blown away, and feeling amazing. And then immediately start thinking, well, if I can do 10:26, maybe I can go under 10 hours. So with Almere finished and out of the way, the plan was to work on run speed all the way through the tail end of 2019 and 2020, with a view to doing Ironman Lanzarote in 2021. I think it was scheduled to be their 40th anniversary of Ironman Lanzarote. So the plan was to go there and do that. And so I'd done the Ironman Lanzarote bike course whilst on holiday there in the build-up to Challenge Almere. I knew what it would be like, and so I decided to focus all my efforts for a year of run training, get down to maybe a 3:30 marathon off the bike. And so that was the plan from Almere onwards. So it started with a December 2019 and 10-mile race, and I did 6:48 miling there, I think. So I was on target for a sub 90 half, which has always been a goal of mine. I've not achieved it yet, but I've come very, very close. So the 10-mile race was on target for a sub 90 half. And shortly after that, I tore a calf muscle, fell off my bike, went over the handlebars, cracked some ribs, tore some intercostal muscles, and had Christmas off. Basically laid up over Christmas 2019, 2020. But the plan from there onwards was a half marathon in February, then Manchester and Valencia marathons. But obviously COVID hit and that all went out the window. But all through 2020 I've been doing some really decent run training, 30 or so consistent weeks of 40, 50, 55 miles, really going well. And as it stands now, I'm about 3 weeks out from when Valencia marathon would have been. I'm still going to be doing a solo marathon anyway, so hoping for an unofficial PB, but we'll see where we get to. Anyway, I'm 50 years old in March next year, so 5 months time I'm 50 years old. So this is a bit of a journey so far video, I think, rather than end to end. I'm not planning on slowing down or stopping hunting the PBs just yet. I know I can still go quicker. In my marathon in 3 weeks' time, I'm hoping for an unofficial PB. And then I've got a couple of possible marathons booked in the beginning of 2021, which I'll be training towards. You know, we don't know what's going on. They may or may not happen, but training will carry on. I never ever lack motivation to train. I really don't. I never ever sit there thinking, do I have to go for a run? I just love it. I absolutely love running. Everything about it. I love setting up the sessions I'm going to do. I love planning the routes I'm going to go. I look at which way the wind's coming and determine the best way to go to get the advantage of the tailwind or avoid the disadvantage of a headwind, or sometimes to train into it. You know, I love every side of the training. I coach as well now, so I'm a UKA running coach and a BTF triathlon coach. So, you know, if you want any advice or some guidance, some thoughts about your training or your structure of your training, stick a message on one of my videos or find me on Instagram at Inspired Runner. But you know, like my channel, stick a comment on there, click the bell icon. I'm going to be posting a lot more videos from now on, weekly guides to my training as we go towards my next marathon and beyond. If you're at a place where you think you're too late to start running or to start triathlon, or you've got goals or dreams or aspirations or things you'd like to do, seriously, ping me a message and I can see if I can give you some guidance or some ideas of how to achieve your goals. But if you're still here listening, thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate it. I've waffled on a little bit. My dog's going to be exhausted, but he loves it. Anyway, thank you very much. See you on the next video. Cheers.